There you go, we are live. I think we are. And if you don't hear our voices, let us know because
Yes, maybe not like the last
I
time.
think
Right?
I've enabled the mic unlike the last time. I also had problems with the mic today. But anyway, welcome to yet another call of Animation Pandemic. And the only animation webcams, I would say the only animation webcast in which the problems are real. But any resemblance to actual event of people is purely coincidental, especially as we speak about
Sure.
whether it's cool or not to work in the animation industry, I would say. Would it not?
Very coincidental.
We're talking always.
Especially when we talk shit about things. In that case, we're making things up 100%.
When things are positive, they are super real for sure. But when they're negative, guys, it's all a work of fiction. Keep that in mind.
Or a friend of a friend.
Plus, I mean, recent studies suggest that this reality may not even be real, but might be a simulation, right? There is a 50% probability that we are living in a simulation. So in practice, they don't know. Which is, I don't know if you can call it a study, really, can you? So today we really want to talk about whether it's cool or not to work in animation and what does that even mean? I mean, can you really say of anything if it's cool to work in anything or not, considering that every person has different background and comes from a different educational path, and also they have different aspirations. So I think there is a lot of glamour surrounding the industry in general, and I think that's why probably it would be good for us to talk about it. And let me introduce our people in here today. As usual, we have Francesca Pesce from Blue Zoo Animation, where she is lead compositor. She's been a light and comp supervisor for a while, I think, on the side, right?
Yes, I guess like 4 years or 5. I lost count.
She lost count of how long she was supervising there.
And
then
today I've been animating as well.
All right, okay. So you're upgrading your skills as you animate as well. Nice. And then
yeah, I shouldn't say that. I just did some fixes.
Is it protected from by NDA? You're not supposed to tell that you also can animate. It's a secret skill. just before other companies decide to poach you away.
Yeah, that would be too good.
Then we have Daniele Duri, who is a principal gameplay animator.
Thank you.
Correct?
Thank you for the gameplay. Yes.
Yes, principal gameplay animator at CD Projekt Red, which you might know for Cyberpunk 2077. For a few games, even Witcher 3. I don't play many games, I have to admit. But I did play Witcher 3 because it came with my laptop, and I spent a summer working for gnomes and other fantasy entities.
And I watched it.
and she watched the matches. And then we have Max Bottega, who is a lead artist at Treehouse Ninja, which also worked on Cyberpunk 2077. Yeah. I managed to get it wrong every time I say it.
And this is the last week that we will be able to claim this, because this is my last week of work for Treehouse Ninjas.
Oh, so you won't be able to claim that. So welcome to Max Bottega, future unemployed gem of the video game industry.
Yeah, unemployed generalist, yes.
Well, we literally just talked about getting new jobs in the previous episode.
So
yes, exactly.
Why do you think I had that much experience on interviews?
So Max is about to rewatch all of our previous talks. He will do the negotiation, of course, because he will have to negotiate something in the streets, probably. So I think that's it as far as the introductions are concerned. We have Michael online, we have Zavron. We might have other people, but the tools I have at my disposal are not very good. So Francesca, is there anything you want to introduce?
Yes, so I am the one that's supposed to introduce the news today, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm asking that.
Okay. The news from today, I think, because it does reconnect a lot with our recommendation at the end of the day, is what happened to, and sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, Protasevich, which was previously an editor for Nexta, a dissident media operator with a really popular Telegram messenger channel, which was supporting protests in Belarus. And he recently moved to Lithuania, so he left Belarus. But while he was flying from, I don't remember actually from where he was flying. He was going to Lithuania, and he was totally not going to Belarus. And then while he was flying to Lithuania, his plane, a Ryanair plane, was diverted to Belarus, to Minsk, and there the poor guy was actually taken by the police and has been imprisoned ever since. And
I think you can call it kidnapping, right?
He was kidnapped. Yeah, it was definitely kidnapped. Him and his girlfriend, and 3 people on the flight suddenly disappeared. So a lot of people
which were the Secret Service agents,
yes,
right?
That's the idea. We don't know it
That's
yet.
the idea. Well, we are going to recommend something which is dystopian at the end of this call, and I think this fits within the recommendation. It's a commercial flight from EasyJet, from Ryanair, that was diverted on account of an excuse, a bomb aboard, just to land and take the guy from the plane.
And he was escorted by a jet.
Escorted by a military jet. Pretty expensive arrest, if you ask me. So we're going to come back to recommendations later on. And now we get on with our agenda. So I would say, is working in animation really that cool? Games and animation, let's include, I always say animation because to me animation encompasses everything really that is CG. But in practice, I know that Max and Daniela are very particular about games, the game side of thing, and Daniela in particular about the gameplay. Gameplay! So I remember that when I started working in animation and I went to the first company I worked at the beginning, I thought I was going to a place where everything worked just fine. I was thinking, I'm going to go and work with the pros. There's going to be this amazing software that will manage everything. And as I animate, my only concern will be crafting the most beautiful piece of animation for an amazing story. In fact, it turned out to be what YouTube recognized as the worst movie on Netflix, if you remember. And things were pretty much digitally handcrafted. I am sure that Max and Daniel agree with this. Mm-hmm. And then on my first job abroad, I was thinking, well, surely the grass is greener on the neighbor's side, right? I'm going to fly away from this country, and if they don't divert my flight, I'm going to land to a place where the pipeline will do wonders. There will be birds singing in the company and butterflies flying around in the meadows as I run in slow motion, handling key frames left and right. And I found out that they were trying to figure out which way was up, just the same as we were. I mean, in practice, everybody's learning every time there is a new project because every project is different. So I have to say that this idea that things were meant to be working seamless faded away quite quickly, in my opinion, to leave room for the reality of things. Which is, the job has its complications and its difficulties, just like any other job, I would say. And sometimes maybe even more, I don't know. What do you think, guys?
It's a quite complex job. There's no way around it. It's a very highly technical and attention-demanding job, and it's often using cutting-edge technology because we try to do things more realistic or more innovative. So we're not using software that has been there for like 10 years and it's like solid. It's always the last version of something. And it's always something striving to be better than the previous one. And like everyone knows in the IT industry, that's bad news every single time.
If not last version, it's been programmed while you're working on it.
Just under your feet.
I don't know why this always happens, because I was thinking exactly the same. Every time I step in a new project, I think like, okay, and now we have everything figured out. The previous project finally made sense, and then you step on the new one, and you're not going to use the same version of Maya. Of course not. You're going to use the new version of every single software, and every single bug you find out is all new. And yeah, everything that is unexpected will come out.
And it's a very interesting side effect because if you are in a big company, the big company will have developed a bunch of tools, and these tools are developed for a specific version of the software, which is why in big companies they don't really use the latest version of a software, because they invested a lot of money on that, and they don't want to, with the new version of the software, they don't want that to be the test bed for their next crash in a production. At a certain point, however, they will need to transition. And that's where the fun starts, right? I found it very hard to convince people around me that in CG, something like a Control-C, Control-V operation does not yield the result that you would have in Microsoft Word. And that unlike Microsoft Word, the software has some tools in 3D that, regardless of the software, and you click on them and they do not work. So it's a bit like jumping on a jet engine on an airliner, and there are a bunch of buttons in the cockpit, and some of them have no effect, and some others are wired to the wrong stuff.
And allegedly there's a bomb aboard.
Yeah, and there might be a bomb aboard, but you will never know until it explodes. So
until you land in Minsk again.
So
Exactly.
Zavron in the chat says it's still better than being a factory worker, and I think this opens up a new can of worms.
Yes.
What do you think, Francesca?
So I actually used this exact words, but in Italian, of course, when I was talking to Amedeo previously, because it's a really good point. I have no clue of how it is to work in a factory, so I don't want to offend anybody that actually do work in a factory, but I think there are some pretty bad similarity. And now this opens a really big talk about, it's split. Obviously, I'm talking about VFX here. I'm not talking about games because, first of all, I don't work in games, but also because I think it is different. And it is different also like animation and production. But VFX, for how I see it and how I witness it from outside, but pretty closely, because in London there are plenty of studios that do VFX, it does feel sometimes like a factory. The first factor that makes me feel this way is that people are relegated to a really small task and a really repetitive task. What a LiDAR does in VFX is not what LiDAR does in games, probably completely different, but what it does in animation or in advertisement. It tends to be a really repetitive task, supported by a really strong pipeline sometimes. But this means like the person does less and less, and it's more like just like a constant repetitive job where there is no much thinking. So if you spend like 3 or 4 years as a junior or like a mid lighter and conference, but I think it's the same also for other roles in a big studio of VFX. It might be that you just don't need to learn anything, and maybe you won't learn anything. And this, although it's not as if you were in a proper factory, it does feel to me as it goes that way because you're completely replaceable. And the fact that you're completely replaceable is highlighted by some that's things that happened, for instance. I'm not going to say the names. I shouldn't say the names, but some industry that actually shut down in a day, telling everybody to leave at midday. So this is really specific now. I don't know. I might as well say the name. And people were left without a job overnight, over lunch in Canada, having to pay the rent, and they just didn't have anything. Nowhere to go, really. They just were just stuck there with the necessity of having like a visa to work there. So
I think,
So yeah, we
I
can-
mean, this is not fiction. I mean, it is
Oh,
fiction as far
alright.
as this call is concerned, but it's something that happened in the news in 2019, where a company named NPC, well, a very big company, the company
Yes.
behind The Lion King, just shut down from one day to the other in Vancouver, as far as I read in the news. I think this is the story, right?
Yes,
Um,
and it was a
but-
pretty big things. Like everybody in
Yeah.
the industry knew, because suddenly, like, people were calling. I mean, previous people from my studio, they left the studio to go in Canada. They called us to just check if there was a job, because if they could work remotely. So we were really close to people that suddenly didn't have a job.
Can I say, before Francesca spoils the fun for whoever wants to work in visual effects, that I worked in visual effects, and while there is this aspect that can be similar to a factory job, for which the tasks are made for certain role easier and easier, so that the manpower required to perform the task is cheaper and cheaper, there are also roles in which they still require a certain amount of skills and expertise and art to perform the job. Obviously, there are tasks that the industry would like to completely automate, but in practice, they still don't have the technical solutions to do so. So you might be called to perform a job just because they have no trained monkey, with no offense towards the monkeys, of course, which are very smart animals, or a robot that could do that job. So, for instance, I remember that I used to know someone who worked in the industry for, I think as a junior, they entered as a match move artist in a big company. And they did match move for a couple of years. Now, match move, 3D match move, is the art of animating a camera in 3D like live action. So you use some software to do so. And this person worked for 2 years as a junior in a big company doing match move. And I remember at a certain point, I asked him if he could have helped me with match move. And this person said, I don't know anything about match move. And I was thinking, I asked, how come? I mean, you did that for 2 years, right? And he said, well, I did that for 2 years indeed. But in practice, the tools were so advanced that we didn't need to know anything about match move to do match move on that production.
Told
So,
you.
so one of the problems I think of the visual effects industry is that there are indeed within that some roles that are borderline computerized, and they hire people to do those just because they haven't found a solution yet. But usually these are considered entry-level positions, and I don't think they are designed for you to stay there for longer than a few months, especially if you have something that you want to do in those positions. So if you're stuck in one of such roles for a very long time, then you have to ask yourself what you're doing there. I mean, is that you're not progressing, or is that the company is relying on you more and more for that role? Because I mean, I've seen people who entered as runner in big companies, and they were really good. I know a good modeler, and they entered in a big company as a runner, and I told them, are you sure you want to enter as a runner? I mean, you can be a modeler straight away. And after 2 months, they were modeling in that company. Then I've seen people who entered as a runner, and 2 years after that, they were still runners. So I think there is also the personal contribution that matters in there. But you have to keep an eye open for yourself anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But yes, there are some similarities to factory work in certain roles, in my opinion.
I think it's even like in a higher position, you'll be finding people that
especially
just
in the
know.
higher position, because the management, the more you go up, the more detached from the production and the creative capacity. So it starts becoming more interested in the stocks of the company, more interested about like in the power play, in the HR, in those parts. So the more you go up, the more. That's why they usually replace CEOs or of companies with somebody that was like the new CEOs for like this medical company was like doing space satellites the month before. It's because like the procedure is standard, but it doesn't imply that it's specific to any any markets or
I
any
guess-
type of industries.
Because the only one that knows what's going on in the film industry is actually the ones in the middle. Then, because the junior obviously are learning, the one at the top they have no clue. They think like they're running a pharmaceutical company, and the ones in the middle is like trying to.
The one in the middle are running around on fire.
Yeah.
Help!
while the client comes around, while everything's like going to shit, it's like, and the client comes around, it's like, but I want it more. I don't know, one more emotion.
And it's worth remembering that when an important client comes around, the company looks at its shiniest usually.
Can you say, I don't know, I mean, I'm going to mention it, but then just go ahead if you can say, can you say about the sofa that was moved in a real estate?
Okay, there is a
What is this
production.
sofa thing?
There is a production story where a company was involved in a very, very big project for a very, very important client. And they regarded, I think, this project as their ticket to a much bigger market. And the director flew in for dailies, and the director took a liking to a particular sofa, which was in a particular dailies room. So the legend goes that as the director, the company was massive, so they had a bunch of dailies room on different floors. The story goes that whenever the director was done with a particular department, he needed to move to the next floor, to the next dailies. So the runners would take the sofa, run with the sofa to the next dailies room, and deposit the sofa there, so that as the director was sitting, he was sitting on the same sofa he used, which is a similar story to one I heard about Soviet
And did he
Russia.
ever say, sitting down, say, "Oh, it's still warm"?
It's still warm. I mean, it's not only it's the one I like, but it's warmed up
Okay,
the way I like it.
so he didn't know about this, right? Like he just.
I don't know. I mean, the story.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I don't think he can't know, right? I don't know. Whatever, man. Like
I don't know. I mean, but I remember there was another director, for instance. I think the legend was that he liked bananas, but he liked them chopped without the peel. He didn't like the peel.
Sure.
So runners would have to prepare the bananas that way for the director. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the company is trying to please the director and to provide. Remember that, especially for visual effects, the director is the representative of the customer or the client. The company provides a service,
right.
So it's in their interest to make sure that the client is always happy. So as a runner, that's why I tell people maybe not to go into a runner. As a runner, you may end up doing this kind of stuff for maybe a short time if you're lucky, but you never know.
Can you imagine the amount of stories that they have for like parties?
Yeah,
and
in fact,
stuff?
That would be interesting.
It's certainly more than you that are sitting in front of a
Yeah,
computer.
in fact, you're right, Max. You're right. But I mean, I'm always juggling what they want to do with what they will end up doing. So if they tell me they want to model, I can't tell them go running. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I see your point. Yes.
This opens up another conversation about the client-studio relationship, which is also one of the reasons why sometimes it's really difficult to cope with the schedules, with the deliveries. Again, I'm gonna mention a lot the VFX industry here today.
Yeah.
But this is like it makes it really difficult sometimes for people not to do overtime.
Yeah, I mean, we are opening so many cans of worms, which I think for the people who are in the industry, these kind of cans of worms are already open. By the way, I don't think we are talking about anything groundbreaking, really.
Yeah.
The problem I saw, well, for instance, I think I can make a comparison. Until coming to London and working in visual effects, I only worked on TV ads, video games, full CG feature films, promotional videos. I never really did visual effects before coming to London, and I recall that I think when I was working on feature films, I hardly ever did overtime, almost never, even at a fairly high level. And then when I came to London, it seemed common practice in Soho in London at the time that if you did overtime during the week, you would not be paid. And they would pay, the big companies would pay a dinner, I think. I think that's the way it
At
used
dinner.
to be. At dinner, yeah, you were given a budget, you could order a dinner. And
Just go and buy yourself an ice cream.
yeah, I mean, I think when I was in a company, I remember I had one of the worst pizzas ever, but I think things improved. I remember I ordered a pizza, and when it landed, it looked a bit more like a plastic frisbee, and I remember I put on my headphones and put on a Pink Floyd piece just to pretend I wasn't there as I was eating my frisbee. But I think that has nothing to do really with the visual effects company. That was actually the place where I ordered. Usually there are conventions between these companies and the places where you order.
Right.
Anyhow, the one thing that was on at the time is that during the week, normally you wouldn't be paid overtime unless you started your own negotiation, and then you would. And we have someone in the chat that is writing, and they work in the industry, I know that, and they say that the allowance is 10, 12 pounds. So that makes me think that this thing is still going on. But by default, you're not paid overtimes in the evening, but you're paid the allowance for a dinner. And not even hookers, I would say. I mean, what's the point?
With that amount, I don't think you can go far in London.
I don't
right?
think so. And but they will be paying Saturdays and Sundays. So I think that was the standard procedure. If you ask around people who worked in the industry, I think they can confirm that anyway.
How
that was my
generous, I would add.
Yeah,
I mean-
well, if you, because the thing is, like, I really don't like the idea of overtimes as something that's granted, like the employee needs to
Sure.
do overtime. And I think there was, when I arrived here, I think there was really this big culture of like overtime. Yeah, of course you do overtime, because it's almost like difficult to stand up at 6 when everybody should be leaving, because everybody's still sitting on the desk, and so it will almost be shameful if you just stand up in that moment. And I think it's really harmful. It's harmful for the people that keep doing it as employee, and it's harmful for the people that ask for it. So I think
And
in
it's-
VFX they tend
And
to
even
ask.
if sorry to interrupt, but it is especially harmful for the company that pushes forward that culture, in my opinion. And I will let you talk, and then I will explain why. Go on.
Now I'm thinking of why it's harmful, because I have all my theory about it. It's just that was what I wanted to say. It's just like the people feel forced like to work overtime because this is the culture, and they think also sometimes it's because they weren't good enough that they had to do overtime. Well, instead, if everybody does overtime in the company, it means that something wasn't quite planned. And it means like it's not your fault, but it's actually whoever did the scheduling that did something that wasn't right. And at that point, the company is supposed to pay not the single employee with his own overtime and blood.
I think one of the reasons why the overtime culture in the visual effects industry, at least the way I experienced it anyway, is really detrimental to the company in the first place, is because if you are in a nation in which by default the bigger companies maybe don't pay overtime during the regular weekdays, but they still rely on this job to get the movie done, it means that they cannot be accurate when they build an estimate for the next job. So
That's
they
true.
are always going to get it wrong. And I think in a world where there is a certain amount of competition when bidding for a visual effects movie, the company will be forced, since they don't know how long it takes to do something really. I mean, they have their own schedule, but in practice, I mean, if it's not uncommon, I think, for sometimes to work 12 hours even during the week. And what happens if you have 1,000 people and they all work, I don't know, 30% more every day than they were supposed to? Now that means that any estimate you have is going to be off by 30%. So as a company, you now don't know anymore how long it takes to do anything or how expensive
That's
that
a
is.
very, very good point you're making, honestly. Yeah.
I think it is like down to the employee as well, because I saw this happening as well. I mean, it can always happen. I mean, we can always go from a project to another. There's always the risk that you can go to a project where you need to do more overtime. But if you push too much on the previous project, chances are that then the next project you need to push even more. So yes, it's down to also. I mean, you need to also be considerate when you do overtime. It means like you creating the wrong culture as well, and you might be responsible for the next project that goes wrong.
By the way, I think it's not. I think it's no longer a legend that if you overwork yourself, you produce less.
You do. It's like you can't keep like the same concentration, and I think that there are really good research about like working 4 days a week. Actually, I sent you just now like a message. Sent you the,
so there's this article.
Yes,
I'm going to share.
A colleague of mine just sent it to me this morning, so that's why it's really recent about working 4 days a week. It wants to be the UK wants to go. It's not a decision yet, but they're looking into.
It would take about 15, 20 years, I guess.
For the environment, and I guess we're part of the environment, right? We animals, so like
By the way, Simone in the chat says that the 10 to 12 pounds allowance for the dinner is no longer in action since the pandemic started, because of course you work from home.
Right?
No. So I mean, you can cook your own food now. Go cook if you have the time.
Not bad.
Not bad, right?
I would like to bring back the conversation though to why it's cool to work in the industry, because right now we're making it look like working in our industry is shit. Sorry guys, but we are casting an extremely bad light on this.
I was about to do the same, Max.
Okay, so I want to say something. Like, I think our industry is one of the few places where a lot of people has his job as its hobby. It's not unlike to see people like being 3D modelers for like 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, and then go home and do the same for their own personal project, or being animators and go home and do their personal project. And this tells a lot of how much people like what they're doing. I think that working in a field like ours, might it be games, animations, or whatever is in this sphere, comes with the perk that it's a creative job. It's something that it's also very intertwined with escapism, because we're talking about very often like science fiction movies, fantasy movies, video games. So it's something that is intrinsically disconnected with reality. And a lot of people enjoy this, just like to go home and use the same tools that they use it during their work time, because it's also their hobbies. So I'm 3D sculpting in the evening, even if it's like partially what I do in daytime, because it's also something that gives me pleasure. And I don't think that a factory worker can say the same. Like, I don't imagine people like assembling cars, going home, and maybe some of them. Right? No, I can assume like maybe some of them, somebody like skilled or attracted by mechanics. Maybe they go home and they fix cars in the weekend. That's absolutely possible. But I cannot imagine it happening on a large scale, and as a scale as large as it happens in our industry. Mm-hmm. I know so many people that develop their own games, for instance, on their free time, or they have their side project with other colleagues going on.
I think. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. It makes me think that there's something very nice about this. I sometimes I get stuck in working on work, not because I need to do overtime, but because the time flies. Time flies because I like what I'm doing.
But then is it like I mean, you guys in games, like you don't do much overtime as forced overtime, right? Because I understand that, because I did it as well, and I know.
Look at Morpai's face. Look at his face. you think he's laughing?
No,
he's
we're
crying.
Fine. We don't do it.
Okay, wait a second. Okay, Daniele, to you.
Yes.
You tell me, because my suggestion to Max was like, when you don't do overtime, or you're not forced to do overtime, and you like your job, then yes, I completely agree on that. It's like, this is the time where I do my personal project after work, and I like it. When there was a moment when I had to do overtime, and that wasn't a moment when I didn't want to do anything else apart from stop working. So that wasn't a really creative moment. But as soon as I stopped, then again I went back to enjoy my work, because I knew I could stop from working in the studio and either carry on with what I was finding out in the studio or doing something else. That was my choice. So that I really like that part.
The fact that it's your choice makes it a lot easier
Yes.
indeed. Daniele, what do you answer to this?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So what was exactly the question?
So the question is, do you do overtime in a game?
Well, yes.
Do you like it?
I mean, as everything, I mean, in the different companies I worked, I had different degrees of overtime. I would say usually as animator, if there was like correct planning and the things went generally right, then you don't have a lot of overtime. Meaning on a project of like, let's say 2-3 years of game project, you might crunch the last 3-4 months, something like this, which is very acceptable in my opinion. I mean, things happen, or you always have to do some fixes. But my point is, animation usually is wrapped up a little bit before the actual end of the game. So because like, you know, in the end, the main thing of the game is the gameplay, and this is the thing that I would say is most important. So there is like the animation part, it's needed to, you know, for the gameplay to be shown, to be seen, but they need to have that before they go to that stage. I don't know if it's so like after our pass, there is many other passes, so we can't really be at the very end of the project. So that means
it's really nice of you, because sometimes things arrive late to me as a light and a compositor.
Yeah, I know. I think honestly, I think there is some professions that we don't cover in this podcast, like sound designers, visual effect, like actual effect. These are the, like, you have periods of nothing to do, probably because everybody's doing their stuff and they're delaying their stuff, but then, you know, you're like kind of idling a bit, and then you get all at the same time, all at the very end, and then to be done, you know, with a very short notice. Yeah.
I'm still thinking the lighting and compositing. The compositing is actually the worst, because the sound effects usually is made throughout. At least in animation, If compositing, there's definitely the last
you're right.
one.
You just can't do anything, right?
Compositor get the worst. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine about the structure of the visual effects industry, and in general, any production that is CG, and we compared it to a slide where the shit starts slowly going down and starts slipping down the slope, and compositors are at the bottom usually. So whichever part was not fixed in time gets to the compositor. So every department is contributed to this slide, and at the end you have the compositors who have to shovel all of this stuff in a very short amount of time out of the door, which is what Francesca is used to do, I believe, right? Being at the end of the pipeline.
There are moments. I was thinking about what Mark said about, like, let's not be only negative, because when we start this conversation, and this is a really Italian culture, like, you just tend to do, like, to go for the negative parts. But of course there are positive things, otherwise I wouldn't have been in the company and in the industry for so long. And I think it's the pattern, I would say, is that the small teams are better than big ones, and small studios are usually better than really big ones. So the VFX industry, for instance, is usually has these huge companies which are really difficult to organize, and that's why it's more difficult to stop this landslide. While instead, when small studio had a really good experience. And when I started in London, I started with a small studio, as I said, and I was doing a bit of everything, and it was all planned in a month, and it was pretty much, it was only me on the project. It was like a small medical animation. And although at the end there was a bit of overtime, and it might have been stressful, it was really rewarding, because the overtime was just on a small period, which could have been, I think, maybe a week. And after that, it was finished, it was done, and it was really well organized. The head of the studio was dealing with the client, so if the client had really weird request, he would say no, because there was only one person that could cope with this request. And yes, it was. And I remember that, although I don't remember if I was paid overtime, but I was really pleased with the fact that if I was staying a bit late in the working for this last week, I was paid a nice dinner, and then I was paid the cab to go back home. Because the head of the studio didn't want me to travel at night, because he said, like, no, if you work late, you're tired, and you just go back with the cab.
I don't know. I think a dinner wouldn't cut it for me anymore. I mean, I
Yeah, no, but I was.
appreciate the dinner and maybe even the flowers and chocolates,
Oh
but
no,
unless
but
this is becoming a serious relationship, we are not going anywhere, I think.
I think I was. I think the fact that I was my first jobs experience in London, and it was a positive experience overall. And I was really, you feel a bit empowered with the fact that you are a junior, but you given this responsibility and you bring it to the end, and you haven't messed it up. And with the fact that then they recognize your extra work, and with the fact that you really well paid, again, because I was really well paid, so I keep saying this, like I was really well paid, and even if they weren't paying me the extra hours, which I'm not sure, to be honest, it might have been that they paid me and I don't
I
remember.
think they paid you, if I remember correctly, based
I
on
need to
what I
check
remember or what you
my
told me.
invoices. I might be paid, but anyway, I was just overall really happy with the even doing overtimes. I was happy because I know it wasn't long, and it worked out.
Speaking of which, I think there's also an age factor in how you are going to like the visual effects industry. I know we started with the visual effects industry. We didn't even go into feature films or TV series,
Yeah,
which are very different in my opinion.
yeah,
But I think when I joined the visual effect industry, I was already, I think it was about 10 years I was animating already. So I've seen things. And I remember that I was expecting once again to walk into a visual effects company and see things work clockwork, which didn't happen to. I mean, it really happened in certain ways. I thought that the pipeline was, as far as their job was concerned, pretty developed. As far as animation was concerned, I thought that there was still a lot of improvement there. It was clear to me that the visual effects industry was used to do effects but was going into animation. They were transitioning into animation. I have to say that, and I have to say that all of the people I worked with in the visual effects industry, well, all of them, those I remember anyway, they were extremely talented, and a lot of them were nothing short of genius in my opinion. I really felt humbled. And I remember that in the company, you tend to have weeklies very often where you see the work of the companies or they are published in your email. And when I saw the showreels, it was very difficult not to be excited about what they were doing and what they were achieving. It was more exciting for me to see the movies this skill set was applied to, because at the end of the day, I don't think that visual effects movies are famous for their stories or for the quality of the narration very often. So I could see a lot of very talented people doing a lot of very good work for movies that sometimes were good, sometimes were really not that good. But I think at the end of the day, if you decide to work for a client or a company, there is that risk, right? The client or the company, they want to produce their own stuff. And if you don't like their stuff, well, it's your taste against theirs, really. But they're those paying, so you have to do you have to perform the duty that you signed off to perform, I guess. So, but I think that there was this enthusiasm, and I remember when there were bottlenecks in the workflows that I was supposed to follow to finish something. I remember that I really wanted to, I don't know, write a tool or do something to improve it, and I was really excited. I remember once I felt sick, and I took it as a holiday, and I wrote a tool that would help me work better when I came back. While I was feverish in bed, I actually scripted. And the way I learned to work the way I do today, I mean the very technical way that I enjoy working with when I remember to do so, is something I learned in visual effects. Because the environment was so demanding in many ways that you were really bound, I think, to up your game if you wanted to survive in there. And I learned it from people who very kindly taught me that. And most of them, I have to say, were junior if compared to me. They were younger than I was, and they started working a lot later than I was. So for me, working in the visual effects industry was represented in a way one of the biggest pushes towards technical improvement. At the same time, it also marked one of the most difficult moments psychologically, I think, for me. I had both things. I was in a way euphoric because of the stuff I was learning, and in another way, you can see in a big company you can actually see the problems of managing that size and the waste of resources. And very often, when you leave big companies, you sit through a talk with HR and maybe your supervisor, in which they ask you what worked and what didn't. And I remember sitting through one such meetings and explaining how resources were wasted. And at the other end of the table, there was a 22 years old recruiter, and I was thinking, I wonder which kind of notes this person is writing down. I mean, I suspect this person doesn't even know what I'm talking about. I mean, how are they going to? I mean, why are we having this conversation if the other party can't understand what we're?
You say at certain points, and then the Maya 2020, I don't think is as good as the previous ones. And then you imagine like this, this almost, it's like this really young person, like not knowing anything of 3D.
Yeah, I mean, the young person was put in a very difficult position, in my opinion. But at the same time, the young person being there and being not qualified for the job, I think it marks an approach of the company towards this kind of information. So if the company were really interested in knowing what doesn't work, then you wouldn't have this talk with a person which is not qualified, right? There would be a way to catch this information. But this opens up another can of worm that Francesca is probably wants to talk about.
Which is the fact that like the big companies don't really need to do that, because they and this is actually why I suggested this name on this Twitch call, the word cool, because this company are like the ones that are seen as cool, and the CG animation and the VFX they have thousands of studios around the world, but the big ones are the ones that always get the biggest amount of CVs and showreel. So everybody's applied to them. So it doesn't really matter what they do. So what you show previously about MPC, it doesn't really matter if they did that, because there are going to be plenty of people applying next year. So but this is not just to say like every company is like that. In fact, if you apply for companies that are smaller, your experience might be better. You might have less. The tools you're going to use might be less refined, and you might have like a less of a high quality show, but it's not even said. I mean, advertisement is really refined sometimes. They do really great stuff, and you don't need to apply necessarily to a bigger studio. I think a small studio might have a really good culture, and they might not ask you for overtime. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will jump in here to connect to your point and what we spoke about before, watching Daniele half crying and half laughing when you asked him if video game industry had overtime. So here's the thing. Me and Daniele, we work until tomorrow for me on the same project. But Daniele works for CD Projekt directly. And I work for this company called 3 Hours Ninjas. And Daniele works in a company that is 600 plus people right now.
More actually,
right? Yeah. They just acquired the studio. And we have like 12, 14 people. Okay. Yeah. And we're actually working on the same project. They have, it's not a secret that they had a huge overtime. We have a policy of 0 overtime.
Ooh.
Boom. Yeah, no, but it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop here. The point is that as he does overtime, he has some special perks and bonuses and like pension plan and stuff like that. We don't, but we enjoy more freedom. We enjoy more. We are shielded from the high bureaucracy that Daniele has to go through. We are shielded from power plays that certainly happen in that company, like any other large company. We don't have to go through HR bullshit training about inclusivity and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that don't happen in a small company, and that makes me favor small companies towards larger one. Also, you also enjoy the sense of ownership of that project of Cyberpunk, while we enjoy it less because we only work. Of course. It's significant, but
definitely, it does definitely matter. Yeah.
For me, for the kind of person I am, I will always favor like a small studio where my impact, it's less secure, it's less full of perks, it probably pays less, and there's like you cannot like reach like the top of a giant pyramid in terms of hierarchy, but at the same time it allows me to have more human relationship with my colleagues, most of all, and like don't have this too many corporate events or too much bureaucracy. So, but not everybody's like me. A lot of people really enjoy being part of a large company and enjoying those perks. So I would say that there's literally you can find, there's so much today in this industry that you can find the kind of place that you want
Yes.
to work on. It's out there.
In the meantime, I was checking CG Project Red since we were unsure about the employees, and LinkedIn says 873. That's a pretty big company, guys. If you imagine you walk into one of the buildings of a company this big, you may not even see all the people who work there. In fact, probably you won't. Right?
I don't for sure. Like,
But
no, I
you
mean
don't have to walk into buildings anymore.
it's
now, right?
natural, right? I mean, how much can
So did it increase recently? Because from what Max was saying, it seems like...
it was already.
Well, they incorporated a studio in Vancouver.
Ah, okay.
So they did
Just
a
got
big
to-
jump. Just
Yeah,
like
but
that.
it was not a giant studio. It's like I don't know, maybe 20 people or something like that. However, yes, the company was big through the development of Cyberpunk already. So
What's your point of view, Daniele? Exactly, you worked before in smaller company as well, or you always worked in bigger companies?
actually, not really. I mean, as far as gaming goes, I always worked in. I would say maybe the smallest company was Lionhead. Incidentally, like I guess it was 200 people back then, something like
Which
this.
is quite... It's medium size, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, at this point would be considered medium size, but maybe back then
Was big, right?
was still on the big side, yeah. And then Lionhead, Frontier, also a lot of people. Crytek, again, I think.
How many
Back,
people does Crytek have?
I don't know. Back
Let
then,
me check.
again, 400 maybe. Something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
it was on the medium size, going to big, but I think it was
Yeah.
huge before back then because they weren't.
They were
so-
quite glamorous at the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I never see it myself in that sense. I go to a company because I like what they do, and I don't go for the glamour in that sense. But
I don't know. That's not the way I remember it when you tried to seduce me. When you said, "Hi,
What
you
did
know
I
I
say?
work for Crytek," and I said,
when
"Who
did
are
I
you,
do
sir?"
that? when that happened, I don't know. I don't have
know.
memory.
But Crytek seems to have 410 employees based on.
Right.
on
I think they
so
had more when I was there, actually. Yeah.
I have to say that when I worked in companies which were less than 100 people, I had a blast. I was also younger. So I think there is an age factor which I hinted about earlier on. I think if I started in the visual effects industry when I was, I don't know, 21 or so, I think it would have been a blast for me. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more than I did. And I think there are also phases in life where you enjoy something or you don't. So you shouldn't take our experiences only as the sole guidance of whatever is the industry, of course. But I remember that there were young people in the visual effects companies who just started, and some of them were having a blast. For them, it meant fulfilling their dreams. And then, of course, in time, you or they sober up, and they start seeing things also in terms of practicalities. For instance, what if you want to have a family? Can you afford to do overtime on a regular basis during the week? I mean, none of us has children, but in practice, if you had a child, you wouldn't be able to stay 14 hours during the week doing the job, right? Even if they paid overtime, you would have an issue at a certain point.
To be honest, I don't know how does it work in VFX. It's in animation. I think the agreement is that it does. At that point, you just don't do overtime because you have to take care of the children. So like there are definitely people that will say, no, I have to go now. And I think it becomes much more, this person becomes much more balanced than the rest of us, I think, because they have children, they have to leave the job at a certain hours. But in animation, I mean, at least in my studio, it's allowed, as in it's totally normal that they have to look after their children.
By the way, if you don't do overtime, it's not as if they fire you.
I think it's I don't know.
Well, okay, there is the overtime topic. Again, depends on many companies. I would say overall, no, nobody's gonna fire you. I think legally even they can't. I mean, it's not, at least in EU. Okay.
Well, they wouldn't say they fire you for that one.
No, obviously. So it's not that easy. Overtime. Companies, they always say, well, it is an optional thing. You know, we say that there is to do, and then it's up to the person to decide what to do. Okay, so I don't know.
There is pressure, though. I mean,
I
in
would
some
say,
studio.
So there is different kind of pressure. One is like peer pressure, like meaning that you're inside your team. There is always some mechanics, some relationship going through your team itself, right? So sometimes you might get, you're not working while most of us are. You're gonna get some weird looking at you. So this is what I call peer pressure, right? I saw this happening many times in different companies. So. And then there is a bit of do you actually want to have a career in that company? If you want, then you should do your overtime.
But even that things, like, I think, okay, the peer pressure, I think it's really like the wrong culture, because I think because also, like, I was talking to Amedeo about this, like, there are people that are generally quicker and faster, also because maybe they have more experience, and people that are generally slower. And I know that if you work a lot, you will eventually maybe become quicker. But is it? I don't know. I don't think it's. I mean, it's like if you have a certain amount of work to do, and you do it, and you don't have maybe meetings at 7 in the evening when they tell you like to do something extra, then I think you can cope with that, or you can arrange it yourself. I don't think overtime is still the answer. I think it's if you have the right amount of workload, I don't think you have to do overtime. If you are focused and you are a decent person, like if you don't do overtimes, but you are a good artist, not doing overtime doesn't make you any worse. That's my point. And it's
the problem I see is that you assume that the organization has like a linear distribution of work
of tasks.
And on the other side, imagine that you are like an extremely talented soccer player, like a Maradona, okay? And you have like daily training sessions and also in the weekend. And since you're so good, because you put a lot of effort before, you don't show up for those trainings. How is the team gonna look at you? So it's not always about like, okay, I've done my stuff, and so there's always like a part of like a team play, a team dynamic in place. That's why it's not so easy to just like say, okay, I don't want to do overtime, and I want because they cannot fire me. It's a lot of reasons why overtime exists still in 2021.
But I mean, I understand this like team cooperation. I understand it a lot till the point in which, as a supervisor, what I was doing, and I did it in overtime in lockdown, and it was pretty tough. It was trying to get because the schedule was tight. There were some issue to go through. I actually was the one covering for most of all the overtime on my team. And this was because I wanted to avoid the other people doing overtime because I was really in charge of them. So I understand the idea that you need to be responsible. And I wasn't the one. I mean, I didn't make the schedule. I was the one trying to not make other people dying on the project. But I think it's on one side you have the responsibility. But if you are saying a junior, you just arrived, you're doing an excellent job, and you're really good in the team, and then you leave at 6. I still have respect for you because you're still doing your job. And I understand. And you can always turn around saying, oh, guys, do you need any help? But if you ask at 7 or 8 in the evening, I think that something went wrong because, is it really? I don't know. I find it like I'm really against overtime.
Oh, if it was an easy topic, we wouldn't be having it.
It's difficult
Yeah,
because I totally felt the pressure of of the responsibility. I felt the responsibility towards my team. But when I'm on my own as an individual, I don't feel the pressure of the peer pressure, because I think it would be unfair towards me, because I think it's also about like being aware of your own speed. So if by the time you've been through a couple of projects, you know how quick you are or how slow you are. And saying you are in the middle or among the ones that are fairly quick in doing things, and you always finish on time. And then as soon as you don't finish anymore on time, you start wondering if your workload went up to the Everest. So you feel like, okay, maybe if I don't finish on time, it's not probably me. It's probably like something happened, because before I could finish on time. So I think it just comes down to the fact that it shouldn't even come to the peer pressure. It should come to who messed up the schedule. I think it's
it should climb up.
It's like the people you work with shouldn't blame you to leave on time. Should actually thank you for leaving on time, because that brings to a new culture again. And I know you don't want to leave people in can I say in the shit? But you just want to. You don't want to make these cultures carry on and carry on and carry on. So if you don't help your peer today, maybe tomorrow, the schedules need to be rearranged. And I know because it happened to me. Like, so the moment I didn't do overtimes, things start changing. And sometimes so might even be like that the fault is in the one that does overtime.
I think Francesca is raising a very good point. I mean, change happens very often through unforeseen ways. And let's say, if management, for whichever reason, screws it up, okay, something went wrong, we don't know why and how, and everybody fixes it through overtime once, and then since the company didn't track how long it took to do something, and then it turns out that once you read the cold files, the papers, the company delivered on time without any additional cost, because overtime wasn't paid maybe in that instance.
Yeah.
So the next time, whoever managed the previous project is less likely to improve on the scheduling, because the cold papers say that it worked. And also, if the next project doesn't work, their motivation, their abstract will be, well, but the previous one worked with the same schedule. So in fact, I think Francesca may be right when she says that if you don't do overtime in some specific occasions when you feel it's not needed, you may actually be walking towards improving stuff. I mean, when you realize that you work let's say as an animator, we are asked to do, we work on a series, we are asked to do 14 seconds per day, which is, I think it's a number which is fairly normal. If all of a sudden we have to do 25, and we always manage to do 14 without any problem, then, I mean, is the problem that we have to do overtime, or is the problem that 25 is unreasonable with the current level of technology and the current project?
I think one of the things that, because I've seen it, because I obviously usually am quite close to I always check the schedule, and I'm quite close to the schedules once it's done. So I don't have much of a say before the schedule is done, but I check and try to readjust the schedule when I was working on production. And usually it's not even, sometimes it's not because someone was trying to save money on the production, but sometimes it's because they have really big difficulties to understand and calculate things. Because it's saying it's lighting a comp supervisor, I can tell exactly how long it takes to do an episode, how long it's going to take for each person. And if this person doesn't meet the delivery, then I know that it's because this person has a problem coping with the workload, not because the workload is too much. So when we go up, so I could really see the pattern when we go too much above the amount of shots that a person can do, for instance. So the limit is clear, but it's clear for people that are really technical. For people that are outside that, it's more tricky to understand, because there are a lot of small things. Like, I know a shot takes longer if there are a lot of moving cameras, or if the change of lights are several in the episode, or if there is motion blur, or if there are many there are many implications, but I know them. The person that does the contract with the client doesn't necessarily know them. And this goes for every single department. Obviously, they cannot talk to every one of us and trying to make a sense of it, because some of us are really technical people. So it would be really a boring conversation sometimes.
I think the main where we are heading to is a problem of communication. I mean, we are not implying that whoever screwed up is screwing up because they mean to do it, or they're trying to somehow undercut everything and just save money in a sneaky way. But the problem is that maybe they don't have the right information, or they don't know how to ask it, or maybe they are not able to receive it. They don't have the tools to evaluate this information.
I'm also thinking, like, if you ask to a technical person, they might not tell you things that you're able to necessarily grasp overall. So there are people that are more they're better in communication than others, but that comes down to, again, and I think it's when Mark said about a smaller studio, I totally agree with that, because it's Bluezoo, for instance, was a small studio when I joined. It was about 70 people, and I knew everybody by the end of 2 months, and it was really and it was like I think it was already a mid-size, but it was really easy to manage. Then now that we are 400. Oh, we are 400. Yeah, we reached 400 now, and it's now it's getting really complicated. And I think I can see the effort of the studio to try to make it like to give a sense of to these big sites. But personally, I found it that now that I moved to the commercial sites, which is tinier, is like about 20 people. It's much easier for me to cope with that, because I know all the people in the commercials team, and it's a small team, so it's a small management to do on the team, and it's and I'm virtually doing it all the time, so it's much easier to manage. So maybe like doing a small nucleus of in a big company might be more effective. I don't know what's the solution.
LinkedIn says that Bluezoo Animation has 448 employees at the moment, so it's pretty. It's fairly big as a company, I think, at this stage. So I think, especially with the pandemic, I think you can assume that you will not meet most of these people.
You will? What do you mean?
You will not actually talk to most of the people.
Meet. Oh, sorry. I thought you said need. I was like, no. Everybody's fired.
No. You will just not meet most of the people because in practice, it's too big to be managed.
No, I don't. I don't know the majority. Even when they were up to 200, maybe I still knew almost everybody. But now it's impossible.
And there is a call. There is a chat in the chat. There is a question from Zavron saying, and Zavron, I have read your other questions, but I will go through them hopefully. Is it true, Zavron says, that they send you to make rocks all day if you don't do overtime? And I think it's a great question. I can tell you that a friend of mine worked in a very big visual effects company which was famous for very long hours. In practice, the trade-off was that if you work long hours and you were productive, that is, they would give you the best shots. I think that's the way the legend goes. So if you didn't do overtime these long hours, they will give you all the shots that people didn't want to do, but you will still be able to work there. So I think at the end of the day, the problem you have is that your work is going to become your showreel, which is going to become the business card for your next job. So you have to decide, I think, at times of your life when it is an investment to spend those extra hours on it, and when it's not an investment. And maybe you don't think it's ever an investment. But this company I'm talking about, which is big and famous, was also famous for paying every single hour of overtime. So now it becomes really a personal investment, whether you decide or not to do these hours. So I don't think you will be given rocks to do, but I think you will certainly, I mean, the problem is that if you may not get the best shots. But even that, in my opinion, is not necessarily true, because what if you're a good animator and you manage to deliver all your shots in time without doing overtime? I worked with people who showed up maybe a couple of hours late at work. They were great animators. They delivered everything on time and they got the best shots nevertheless.
In fact, and then I don't know if in gaming you notice the same thing, Daniele and Max, but I think there is a huge difference between people's performances. I think there are people that are extremely fast and people, I'm sorry for them, but are extremely slow. And it's...
absolutely.
Sorry?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
I wanted to add something on the topic with Amedeo, but finish the...
No. I think it's sorry. Like I'll let you talk. I did a lot of talk today. This is just like there is a huge gap between people. So like if someone is extremely quick and efficient, even if he doesn't do overtime, he will never be fired. Never, because it's not. You don't find these people everywhere.
I mean,
they're
you
not
keep
rare.
those people,
You
right?
keep them, and it's like that you don't care. I mean, they could give you they can give you any sort of reply. They might not come to the parties. They might not come on time, and you still keep them. they're gold.
Wrap it up, guys, because I want to answer to another question in the
But
chat.
Daniele
So,
wanted to
Daniele.
talk.
Yeah, I don't know. I was a bit in defense of overtime in a way. Like,
Oh no, why?
well, Jesus
Because he's
Christ.
gonna ask,
Okay.
he's gonna ask his minion tomorrow to do overtime.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
Sugarcoating it.
I don't have any power of having everybody stay. So, you know,
Otherwise,
okay.
you would.
And then next
So-
thing you know, yes, tomorrow you will crack the whip and just get them to work for you.
All right. So as I was saying, no, I think in defense of overtime, as you also were saying, I mean, they were like, you have to judge. Like if you were working on your own, like if company was yours, you have your own company, you're freelance, you're doing whatever you want. Would you not do that overtime? You have to finish something, you want to, get on with the next job, whatever it is. Would you not spend extra hours on yourself? Okay, so this would be the first question. Then obviously, you're not working for yourself directly, you're working as an employee in a bigger company. However, you have to judge, will my overtime be of any use to me? Okay? And this means, will it be paid? Will it be, is the overtime paid? Will the overtime make me look better for a promotion? There are many aspects to because people are like, oh my God, and overtime is terrible, it's shit. Like, yes, I mean, I don't want to do it, but it happens. And, you have to judge if it benefits yourself in the end, because I'm also very much aware and sure that there are many occasions in which, maybe you are a junior in a company, you're like cannon fodder pretty much. You're gonna do your overtime. The game is gonna, or the game or the movie is gonna be over, and then you're gonna be out, and you didn't gain much because all you animated was I don't know, tails on ears of characters.
Of course, that's what I was saying.
This is not useful overtime probably. However, you have to judge, like, so let's not discount it as oh no, like it's bad overall. And so this
No, I think I mean, I don't think this is the conversation really. I think there is a moment when I mean, I think there is a difference between putting in more hours because that could really improve your work and as a result also the project, and putting in more hours because there is a general request to do so, but you don't know exactly what's the EO of that request. So I think I've been through companies in which they told me, oh look, we really need to finish tomorrow, but tomorrow is Saturday, can you stay? And I was like, yeah, well, if we need to finish, I mean, am I going to be the freelancer that disappears one day before the deadline and the project doesn't get delivered in time? And then I've been in places where they told me, from now on, every Saturday and Sunday we all work. And I was thinking, that's bizarre because on my schedule I am on time. So I mean, where does the request even come from? And there was no explanation. There is an intervention in the chat from Simone. He says, don't you think, guys, that studios are relying on this widespread feeling of self-guilt to avoid paying for overtime? If you're a junior, you up to the point that you feel responsible for other people's mistakes in scheduling tasks. So
but you're not, right?
I think there is a general, I mean, if I have to judge by my own meters, I have to say that in certain company where I worked, the feedback wasn't very clear at the time, as in I wasn't really even sure if I was doing a good job. And that made me feel like I had to work more. And I don't know if this was used deliberately as a tool of negotiation to make me work more, but if I have to think of my students, for instance, a lot of them they think they're not ready to work. Even if some of them, in my opinion, they have material that proves that they could do the job. I mean, you're never ready to do anything in reality until after you have done it, in my opinion. But the thing is, if these people who feel very insecure about their skills go to a company where it's not clear when you're doing a good job and where the company routinely employs overtime, well, then it may be true that at least inadvertently the company is taking advantage of this overtime culture, or they're not thinking about it.
I think it's pretty official that they take advantage of this in certain companies. It was pretty obvious on the fact that the budgets were including the quarter of the work. Like it's a big company just took advantage of like a big chunk of extra work to finish films. But I mean, I agree with Daniele actually. I mean, I understand there is a really a big difference in how you do overtimes and the reasons behind it. So saying you're doing the final push for a really good project you're really passionate about, your team is great, and you all going towards like making it much better, which is gonna also work in your favor because that means you really have a nice piece on your showreel. I think it totally makes sense. I would do it as well, even when I'm even older than that. I will still do it. I think it's as Amedeo said, it's like when you have the situation where you're just doing repetitive tasks, or maybe you're doing things just for the end time because someone changed his mind at the last moment and you have to work overtime because of that, or because maybe the schedule wasn't clear.
But somebody always gonna change his mind at the last moment.
Yes, but
that's so true, right?
It's true, but then it depends like who is responsible for that. If someone changes his mind at the last minute and then is expecting you to do overtime for that, and to take responsibility for his change of mind, which happened at the last minute, I think, how do you expect me to feel responsible for that? That's my point.
Yeah, I think I want to intervene on both points. Someone always changes their mind, and then how do you expect me to feel responsible? If there's a change of mind in a company, and the change of mind is not due to your failure, I think, in my opinion, the moment this implies overtime, I think your question should be, who should I talk to get this overtime greenlit? And now you're negotiating. Yeah. Because otherwise you just assume you're going to do it for free in the night, and that's it. So in my opinion, whenever there is a change of schedule, I'm happy to help deliver the project. I don't really have a problem with that. In fact, I'm even too eager to do that usually.
Yes, but that's a common problem, and that's
but the question then becomes, well, who should I talk to get this overtime approved? Because in the contracts they often write that if you want to be paid overtime, the thing is, in the contract they write that you're not allowed to do overtime unless it's approved. So you should, in my opinion, whenever the situation arises, you should ask who to talk to approve this overtime. And that's it, and you get your negotiation, and I think that your game there, you do the negotiation. The other point was people always changing their mind, and I disagree in a certain way, Daniele, because my experience with full CG feature films was that in general what happened is that the story was pretty set, and at least in the movies on the movies I worked on. So I never experienced the introduction of a new sequence or new shots or a complete change of shot. In fact, one of the reasons why the visual effects industry to me looked a bit strange is because coming from feature films, we knew very precisely what to do. And these big changes of mind didn't really exist. I mean, it was only in the visual effects industry where somebody could approach you and say, "Can you do this animation with another mood?" In the feature film industry, we talked directly to the director, and the director said what they wanted, and we went for that mood. Then maybe we could talk about how to better convey that mood. But I think that was the reason why I much preferred on that aspect of taking decisions. I much prefer the CG feature film industry. In the CG feature film industry, you had a producer next to the director When the director said, "Can we change this?" the producer would say, "This is due tomorrow."
Yeah,
And
it's like we don't have bandwidth for this, or we do. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the visual effects industry, since I think it's a service industry, you do not have that. If the director says, "Can we do this?" I mean, you're not part of the negotiation. Nobody in the room is part of the business negotiation usually. So if the director says that, well, it's possible that the director is going to pay more. You don't know. And one of the biggest differences between the CG feature film contracts I went through and those in visual effects is that visual effects would buy your time. The feature film industry would buy your time for a movie, for a specific project. So in visual effects, you were someone sitting there and doing your job for as long as it was needed and for whichever project it was needed. We talked about that last time. So in practice, if they tell you to redo that shot 10 times, you redo that shot 10 times because it's a bit more explicit in your contract, I think. While the feature film needs to finish. I mean, the feature film has this thing that it needs to finish because it's usually done with in-house money very often. I mean, there's a much higher stake.
I get it. Yeah.
And there is another call from Simone talking about the visual effects industry. If everybody starts to do 9 to 6:30 job, it won't last a month with the cost of today's visual effects. I think
it's not said.
Exactly. Sorry, Francesco, for interrupting,
Go
but
ahead.
I don't agree with that statement because, in my opinion, that statement kind of justifies the shortcomings of the organization of these massive productions. I think the reasons why this work can't be done now with less time is because of lack of organization and in general the habit of keeping things as they are. Francesca, what do you say?
There are various reasons for this. This is not right. I think it's there are different reasons why the things goes wrong, but it can be that one of the questions you might ask yourself if you're a producer, for instance, is that what are we paid for? So I know for VFX, there's always the tendency to do something really huge and big and powerful, but it's like if you paid peanuts, you do something for those peanuts. You don't do something for a Titanic movie. And if you paid for a Titanic movie, then you do the Titanic movie. And in CG, when you do 3D, there is a really set budget for each thing. So the worst things you could possibly do as a producer, for instance, is like budgeting for like a really small production and then making something and then allowing the director to go really high in quality. So I think there is a rule. It's like it depends on how much money you get in CG, then you get something really specific for that. But even if for what you get paid in VFX, there is no way you cannot produce like a decent movie if it's very well organized. I think a lot of times there are plenty of people sometimes not having anything to do for days in VFX. I think it happens far less in animation. I'd be terrorized if someone in my team wasn't doing anything for one day.
Can I interject in here? I remember an experience I had in visual effects when I walked into the company, and it turns out that the live action footage was late. So now the company hired X amount of people to work on something, and I walked into the room and people were watching YouTube or Facebooking, and because there was no footage to work on. So I mean, they could do their own tests, of course, and which would be an investment in many ways, but that's all money that rests on the shoulders of the company. And I wonder at a negotiation table, what did the company negotiate with the studio who was supposed to deliver the live action plates, for instance? So, and that's, imagine you have 500 people at £200 per day, and that's, or 1,000 to make math easier because I suck at math. So 1,200 people, that means that you pay 200,000 every day. These people are not working. So you work in a company where the plates are late, and now 1 day of delay is £250,000. And of course, you're going to make these people run the moment the live action plates come in. But the problem is in there, did the company have a fail-safe in there, some sort of negotiation tool for which they can compensate this cost if things ever go wrong, and they do go wrong all the time, right? I mean,
there are contingency money which exist, but nobody talks about them because it's
No, of
otherwise
course.
it means like you are allowing for something extra. So this is kind of a secret in the budgets.
I mean,
But-
whenever I worked as a freelancer and I had to sign a contract for providing assets to another company, I had collateral damage in the contract. So if I wouldn't deliver the job by that day, I would actually get my contract, my money reduced by a substantial amount.
okay.
It happened before. One of my collaborators was late. He was fuck it up big time. I ended up basically delivering, it was cars, like modeling cars. I ended up delivering like a couple of cars for free to make up for the delay. And that was me. I had like my studio was like at best 10 people big. When you're talking about companies that size, lawyers are involved in signing the contracts. So there's certainly some amount of collateral included in the contracts if things get late because of that. I wouldn't be surprised if they even have insurances on those things.
Could
There
be.
should be insurances. There are also companies that come in and admin the company if things go terribly wrong. There are companies whose only job is to make sure a movie gets completed, and they have all the legal tools. I know because I
The
spoke
vultures there.
I spoke to no, they're fairly. I mean, they're professionals who go to the point. I spoke to one such people, and I mean, it's their job. They go in and they admin a company as if it was a bankruptcy. So they evaluate which assets they have, and they evaluate what needs to be done to finish the movie, and then make sure that the movie finishes. So there are, I mean, with this amount of money, there is of course an array of tools they can employ. I'm not familiar with those, but I think the side effect is that the visual effects industry has a lot of companies bidding for the same projects. So that probably also makes them a lot more vulnerable to delays on the production side. Plus, imagine that one of your clients is Disney. I mean, Disney moves billions of pounds every day, billions of dollars. If you and they own so much stuff that if you make them pissed off for whichever reason as a provider of service, you may lose not one client but an array of clients. So I wonder which kind of negotiation is in place in these cases. So
It's a bit of a feudal structure, I think, with the clients. So if you have a really good client, you never want to let them down, which means sometimes you're inclined to say yes, even if the client asks for a really last minute thing. And it just maybe like they ask for something that's unreasonable, but you still say yes because it's your main client and it's going to give you lots of fun.
I think there is a way to educate clients, and I think
sure.
Yeah, and I think it's something that has to be enforced pretty early on, and it's a bit like with kids. If you don't establish a routine early on, then all of a sudden, if you say no to something, you have no grounds to say no, and the other person is not stupid. They are like, what? Why? All of a sudden, it was working okay until yesterday, and now it's forbidden. Why is that?
Exactly. But the reason why people, I mean, once again, if people wants to do overtime for a reason, that's okay. But if someone is making you feel peer pressure or just pressure in general from the company, the reason why there is overtime is because sometimes maybe a director cannot make a final decision on something or a decision on time. The client maybe asks for a last minute fix and the producer don't want to let him down, or the studio doesn't want to let him down. So there are a bunch of reasons that are actually not they usually not really, they don't really, as a single person in a studio of 800 person, you're definitely not responsible for the delays. That's the point. But the director is, the producer might be, and the client is. So
well, in general, imagine the structure as a structure where you have the director at the center, or whoever, a manager, and then all of the lines converge onto this person. Of course, they tend to have more responsibility. That's why they're paid more, right?
That's why they have to take this decision. When a director says, I don't know, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's tragic, right?
Yeah, it's tragic. I want it more funny. funny is not a
make
feedback.
once I think Daniele, I think on Leo there was something on the script saying the character gets into the scene and does something funny. I think there was.
Yeah, okay, but it's not exactly industry standard.
No, it's not industry standard.
You
I mean,
never
that
know.
would be.
You never know. You can always meet another director like that. Yeah.
No, I think.
You mean
I've
one that
never
throws
met-
chairs at you?
Oh, yeah. Did that happen?
It did happen, not at us in
Not
particular.
at us, not at
But yes, the Italian movie was quite unique, I think, in many ways. Having said all of this about overtime, I have to remind that when I was working in full CG feature films, I hardly did overtime, and I could even spend entire days just animating. So it was for me, I was really happy about it. But I remember that after 1 year or 2 years doing animation, I started to feel like animation wasn't the only thing for me. And this is why I was saying earlier on, if you go and I don't know, if you go and work in visual effects when you're very young and motivated, you may have a blast. It's just that there is a time when you may realize that you're really happy to do that kind of stuff, but your interests, you have now other interests as well. So I think for me, I was very excited about animation for long periods, but then I also had periods in which I was interested in other stuff. And I think that if you study animation, even online, they will all tell you that you need to get yourself a life, because life informs animation and not necessarily the other way around. You can only animate if you do have a life, in my opinion. So, and this is probably why we're talking about overtime or the lack thereof or the pressure behind it, because as individuals, you tend to want to have a life outside this discipline that you're studying, because you need stimulus somewhere.
Yes, yeah, sure, stimulation. Yeah.
So it's very important, in my opinion, that you have your own mental space. And I remember when I was very happy to do animation on some feature films, I didn't go back home and open the 3D software at all. I was having a blast. During the day, that was enough for me. I wanted to do something else for the rest of my time. I didn't even very often switch on the computer, which is remarkable considering the age we live in right now, right? So to me, and the animation industry provided something that was in line with my interests. I was one of these people who played games because I wanted to see the cinematics, I wanted to see the animations in game, I wanted to see the story. The game itself.
Why not? Why not?
I wasn't interested in gameplay animation, Daniele. You hear me?
Even before it was a term.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know it existed, and I was happy just the same.
I'm sorry, Daniele. Also, I was just watching my brother playing games, but I was actually enjoying the cinematic of the games.
This is wrong. I'm out of this conversation.
Yes, for me, I was always interested.
Sorry,
in that.
why are you interested in cinematic in games? I mean, at this point, game cinematics are very well done and detailed. I mean,
Yes.
it depends, however, but then just watch a movie. How about
No,
that?
it's
For me,
not.
I tell you, Daniele, when they play, like them playing games was so long time ago that it was that golden era of PlayStation 1, where
right.
like the cutscenes
Yeah.
were
It
like
wasn't PlayStation, it was the PC. And it was, the cinematic on Diablo 2 were amazing. I remember, to be honest, the first things I downloaded, and this is really, really old, okay, and a bit cheesy. The first things like I downloaded when I was still a 56K internet connection, it was the videos of Final Fantasy VII. And this is how I got into 3D for the first time.
Right.
Oh, are you taking it?
Guys, I don't know. When I speak about cinematics,
Is this Wing Commander? What is it?
This is Wing Commander 1. I mean, when the Final Fantasy cinematics came out, for me, I wasn't interested. I mean, my cinematics needed to have a story to them. So I just I just needed to watch the whole game unfold, and I was waiting for these amazing pieces of CG.
Later replaced by true actors, if I don't remember wrong.
Yes,
right?
in Wing Commander 3, you actually had Mark Hamill, which was the guy was
Yes,
Luke Skywalker.
Such a great game, man.
So you see, you're agreeing with us about the cinematic there, right?
No, I'm
That's
not.
where you go.
I'm saying that it's a great game where you do things.
It was a fantastic game, in fact.
So
I mean, the space simulation was actually secondary at a certain point to the story, in my opinion. But yeah, so for me, the idea that I could work on products that were crafting stories, I was really happy about it. I was really happy. I mean, the idea that I could see a character come to life. I remember I did that. I did a web design stint at a certain point, and I really disliked web design because there was really no story behind it. I was just assembling websites, which I don't know. I guess if you have a certain mindset, it's just as gratifying as telling stories. For me, it just didn't cut it. So for me, the animation industry was cool because of this. And I really had a blast when I was animating on a project that I enjoyed. And even now I'm working on a video game, and the only reason why I'm working on it is because I played the prototype and I had fun. I thought, you know what, it's kind of cool, and that's why I started working on it. But I wouldn't otherwise have considered it. So for me, I must believe a little bit in the project. And when I was a lot younger, I remember that I was more interested. Animating was already enough for me, but then the older I grew and the more I felt that I had to believe in the project a bit more to be really, really motivated.
I think also that junior artists are now they want to like the project, which is really fair in my opinion. I think it does.
It's called being a millennial. Because it's called being a picky millennial.
Yes, which is like what you hate if you are recruiting. But then on the other side, you think like, well, but at least they have it clear. They have a clear mind. I didn't choose anything when I just got my first job. I was just like, yes, I got a job, and they just already have it all figured out. I don't want to work on this. I want to work on the other job. Well,
yeah, can I say something else? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm interrupting because also we're running out of time. And for me, yes, I got a job didn't even exist as a concept. I remember the when I got a job, I thought, yes, I'm going to do animation. That was it. And then I stopped a second and I thought, wow, they pay for it.
They must be crazy.
They must be crazy. Yes, they don't know what they're doing for sure. But for me, the moment I started considering jobs is when I was less interested in them. And I realized that was, I think, in a way, a very enthusiastic way of seeing the job. But when I moved, for instance, to the UK, I realized that the industry was a lot more structured than it was in continental Europe. And the visual effects or animation or video game industry was seen as a possibility of employment very often, which for me is unthinkable. If I were looking for possibilities of employment, I wouldn't pick a job where my full brain power is required to steam through the day and deliver a piece of animation, because you are required to be fully focused on your task. And I think that when I was fully focused on my task, I was really happy. I could really lose myself into the animation I was doing when I was motivated. I didn't have that level of motivation throughout every single production and all the time, but when it happened, I was super, super happy. I was really happy to see my animation, although I disliked watching them because they weren't as good as I thought they were. And when you went to the movie to see your movie, the movie you animated on screen, you were always super scared to see it on screen, because what if when your shot comes it sucks, and it usually does. So-
Amedeo is hypercritical now of himself.
It wasn't actually. When I
You know.
watched that shot, I thought it was cool, but I'm not an animator.
I know, but the thing is, if you have done it, I mean, when I did when I look at my showreel, I even remember sometimes the days in which I animated that, and I remember thinking, oh, I was a bit lazy there. I could have pushed more. And so when I watch my showreel, I'm not really at ease. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. And there was something else we wanted to talk about anyway, which was deep working or very focused working version versus distracted working. But I think we have to talk about it in the next time, because it's a subject in itself. Because as a teaser, I guess, I remember that the moment where my productivity went down is when the internet came into our workstations. For me, it really changed the way I worked. But that's just a teaser for the next time.
But some studios don't allow internet connection.
What's the
I
title?
remember,
The effect of porn on working day. Is that the title?
I remember one place we both worked together, Amedeo. It was Scanline, and they did not allow internet on the PCs. And if you wanted internet, you could use it, but they dedicated 2 PCs in the cafeteria or something. Yes. And I've never been so productive like that thing.
I remember.
But it is obvious because I don't know. It is what it is, and it's not even, like sometimes, like things take time. Okay, now depends if I'm like fully into an animation that I'm doing, and it's like it is fine. However, if you have to do a lot of back and forth work, meaning, okay, I'm now exporting and now I need to launch the editor, now I need to do this, then launching the editor itself sometimes for me takes 10 seconds, whatever. Those 10 seconds I can read something, right?
Yeah, but that will start a fire here, because I think there are studies that demonstrated that if you get distracted in those 10 seconds, it takes you 20 minutes to get back to your
Well, no, I mean, you can master that, but
Good luck.
You can master the ability. Well, come on, in the end, it is multitasking, right? In a way.
Yeah, okay. Well, the thing that we are famously able to do, right?
Yes, I hate multitasking.
So no, I think this is a subject for another talk.
Right.
And then Simone says, Francesca, why play Diablo if not for the cinematics? I agree with that. I don't see any reason to play Diablo apart from
This is the last time I'm in this
in this call.
Controversial talk. Man.
Although what are we talking about here? Are we talking about Diablo 2 or the last one? Because last one
I don't
was
know, but we don't have time to specify the
I
version.
know, but
and
Diablo
then
2 was okay, also for the gameplay.
And
but
then
the cinematic
Simone,
was amazing.
And then Simone says that the StarCraft intro was influencing the first Iron Man, and or the other way around. I'm not sure about the sentence there. I think, there was this StarCraft intro with the Space Marine being built, remember? And I think, is it possible that Iron Man came after that? So it's possible that there was. I think games and visual effects. It did, right? I think games and visual effects.
StarCraft 2 is from 2009. That cinematic was in 2009 for sure. So I don't know about Iron Man because I don't watch kids movies.
Iron Man is 2008.
You don't watch kids movies.
You don't watch kids movies.
That opens another conversation.
Then getting controversial here.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have to call
we
it a day.
started with politics, and then we're ending up with like.
I'm sorry if you attack games for gameplay, I'm gonna fight back. So.
And then there is David Hallows online who says that he would love to hear about real-time rendering and creativity as an animator. But I think that's a whole new topic. I think real-time is changing things quite a lot, in fact. But we have to talk about it in the next call, and today is a bit late for that. But I think it's a good topic. In fact, I will have to take note of it. And then I guess...
I would like to take a second, because last time Marta asked to show what I was working on. So yeah, I'm sculpting these fishmen. Okay, so these are, I cannot really see. Yeah,
With better camera.
maybe. I have a bunch of these
But
guys.
is it from
building.
Games Workshop or you?
Yeah, these are miniatures from Games Workshop that I really didn't like some kind of zombie ghouls. They all look like the same, so I'm turning them into. I'm putting fish heads on them. So and hopefully I will also paint them in the
So
short.
you're modifying. That's kind of cool.
Yes.
Nice.
So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you,
In fact, it
Marta,
was a
for
request
asking.
from YouTube. Yes, thank you, Max. And I think it's time for us to wrap it up, and it's time for suggestions and recommendations, which of course we make no money from. So Francesca would like.
Not
funny
yet.
that-
So
that-
guys,
that you-
hit that like button, please.
Yeah, please do, because this will help us anyway. So I'm going to share. Francesca has a suggestion, so she's going to go first because she's the one who came first with the suggestion today. I mean,
Sorry.
she started with, if you remember, with that news about the Belarus Ryanair flight being diverted just to arrest a person, and she ends up with a dystopian TV series, an anime. So, Francesca, can you tell us about this?
Okay, so this became a cult recently. So this is not recently, actually. It's been a few years now. It's called Psycho-Pass. I don't recommend season 2 and season 3, but I do recommend season 1 and the movies. They're all exceptional, and the story is really interesting because it's a dystopian story about futuristic Japan, and it's set in a society where essentially everything is run through a supercomputer called Sibyl System, and it's a powerful network that makes a scanner of people's brain to basically calculate what's in their mind and what's their crime coefficient. And through this one, the police take action. So it might pursue the people that have a high crime coefficient or kill them. And this is shows the downside of running a society relying solely on technology, and the technology that cannot distinguish the subtleties of a person's mind. And the Psycho-Pass is actually a really interesting anime because this came out in 2012, and in 2 years later, China adopted a social credit system, which is really similar in a way. So it kind of makes China a little bit like
maybe they watch this anime, right?
Maybe they watch it.
Thanks, Francesca, for making this video censored in China and losing half
Yes.
of our views. Thanks.
And also China, which surely someone watched Psycho-Pass, but then they decide to ban it. So Psycho-Pass never made it to China. Apparently,
Yes.
it was.
And neither will our show.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not even this call we made it to China. Maybe now.
Yes.
So maybe
sorry for making you lose
So maybe when we say Psycho-Pass, we should say Psycho-Pass. So that the AI won't know that we're talking about that.
So maybe today we've lost Belarus and China.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly. So
exactly.
2 less nations on our list. Any other suggestion? Any other recommendation?
Well, I can recommend the game that I'm playing at the moment and where these miniatures come from. It's a mix between Magic and Warhammer. It's called Warhammer Underworlds. It's a competitive game. You play against another person in a 1-to-1 match on this hexagon board, and you have these war bands. You probably can find. Oh, there you go. Each one has this set of miniature that come with a specific type of skill, and then you roll dice and you kill each other. It's a very entertaining game. I should have prepared this before, so you would have had the time to show something, but there it is. Warhammer Underworlds.
Yeah.
Very good.
And just to chime in with Francesca's recommendation of dystopian movies, well, there is a classic Hollywood movie which is Minority Report.
Yeah, it goes a lot into that direction, right?
Which I think you can watch the movie, but you can also read the book.
I would rather read the book, but okay.
I would rather do it, of course. I don't remember the name of the author. Is super famous, and I read a lot of his books.
Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick. So if you actually, a lot of these authors' books have been adapted to science fiction movies. I've read a bunch of his novels, and I have to say that some of them they look a bit underdeveloped. They have a very nice core idea, very strong, but I can see how Hollywood took that kernel and made it into a movie, because they really are really strong in terms of core ideas, in my opinion. And if you are into older movies, then another dystopian movie would be Brazil from Terry Gilliam, which I know that Daniele didn't manage to finish to watch it all. And
why is he in this conversation?
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel
But
a
next
bit of
time
an
it won't be
outsider.
here because we don't recognize gameplay animation as an art, so it doesn't need to be here anymore. So Brazil is some 1984-ish like movie, again set in a dystopian future. It's not. It doesn't. I have to warn you. It doesn't have the pace. These are ads. It doesn't have the pace of a modern movie. So if you have watched Minority Report first, Brazil will
Yeah,
probably
no,
put
let's
you to
not do
sleep.
that. Yes,
I think you should do the opposite if you really want to watch Brazil.
I don't
You
think
should go
it's just.
back in time, watch it back then, and then come back.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
It's not just the pace. It's also like it has a weird humor, really weird humor. I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but you can give it a shot, of course.
I don't think it's for everybody, but I'm just recommending it because when I watched it, I didn't even know this kind of stuff existed, and for me, it was a blast. I looked at it and I was like, "Whoa, it's incredible!" Now, probably if I watched it again, I would be feeling sleepy, I guess. But I think it's a fairly important movie in a way, and you should probably have a look at it just to see what it talks about. I think it's interesting, and I think that's it. Is
But
there
before
anything
wrapping
else?
up, I actually want Daniele to give us a recommendation of a game that you really like, but doesn't have a cinematic, but is still really good.
Oh, that's a challenge, Daniele.
I don't know. It isn't. I mean,
It is there's plenty.
doesn't have a cinematic. Okay. I mean,
Oh, it has a
there isn't
cinematic,
any.
but it's not really the core. The story is not that important.
Ah, jeez.
My browser tab is open, Daniele, waiting for you. pressure.
Well, I mean, there are cinematics. However, one of my favorite games ever would be Bloodborne.
Okay.
So the cinematics are really not the main thing here.
There's
What's
one?
this about? Because I'm really ignorant about games. So.
Can I say it's a gothic version of Dark Souls?
Oh, okay, but Dark Souls
Not,
has the story though.
okay, sure. I mean, it's not too detailed and is very much to interpretation also. But I don't know. I would recommend this one.
Bloodborne. I'm going to paste the link in the chat just for whoever is watching.
I'm still
Is
hoping
it
they're
there?
gonna make a version of it for Nintendo Switch so I can play it in bed.
It's not going to happen. I mean, it's
So
always
is
been
it, what's the gameplay? Is it like a is it in action or?
it is a
It's a Dark
third-person
Souls.
action sort
Oh,
of
okay,
game.
okay. I see him. Same gameplay. I do like these games actually. But I would even love them more if there was cinematic.
You also need to
yeah.
like Punishment to like this game, so beware.
Punishment, I haven't heard of it.
I mean,
No,
it's,
in life. I mean,
Punishment
it's-
as
In
in
life,
you
you-
like to
yeah.
be punished. Okay.
you need to enjoy pain. Is that
Oh,
it?
okay. Is that it?
Yes.
Is it because you really struggle to go ahead and to overcome the level?
Yeah, I mean, at least me. Maybe Daniele is a more a professional player, but I sucked at this game.
Okay, guys, I think I have to call it a night. We went 25 minutes long almost. So thank you very much for anybody who joined us tonight. I think it was a lot of fun, at least for us. I hope it was the same for you. I'm going to paste in the chat the link to our previous call in case you're interested. And remember that we stream every Thursday at 5 p.m. UTC. And again, bye. Have a good night.
Goodbye,
Bye.
everyone.
But
Bye-bye.